So what is it?
I'm the Doctor.
So what is it?
I'm the Doctor.
So what is it?
I'm the Doctor.
Only joking.
I'm the Doctor.
So what is it?
I'm the Doctor.
So what is it?
I'm the Doctor.
Only joking.
I'm the Doctor.
So what is it?
Small off-duty Czechoslovakian traffic warden.
So what is it?
I'm the Doctor.
Only joking.
I'm the Doctor.
So what is it?
I'm the Doctor.
Alright dudes, it's time for another episode of It's Time to Rewind. I'm known as Bubbawheat. Not to the Bubbawheat, not first name Bubba, last name Wheat, just Bubbawheat. This season is Red Who, where I'm covering British sci-fi like Red Dwarf and Doctor Who. And joining me 3 million years in the future via the TARDIS is my guest Stacey from Stacey's Pop Culture Parlor. How are you doing today?
I'm pretty good, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. It's it's kind of bittersweet because, this is... I have maybe 2 more Doctor Who episodes, 1 maybe 2, but this is kind of like the spiritual end of this season for me here. This is the last episode of this this time loop episode, the real meat of the episode. Where I've been breaking this episode down into 9 episodes of the podcast, and I may or may not do and skip ahead and do an episode of Ncuti Gatwa's season, because as we're recording, he just started his second season. The first episode just aired yesterday.
Spoiler alert, it was quite good.
But I have not seen any of that, and I don't, just kind of glancing at like the episode descriptions, I don't believe that there's any time loopy episodes, but I have been doing every Doctor. I definitely don't think that I'm going to cover David Tennant's return, even though he is technically the 14th Doctor. Yeah, 14th Doctor, because he only did 3 specials, and I already covered David Tennant, so even though he's back as a different numbered Doctor, I think I'm fine skipping him. But I may come back around. I still have with the way I'm doing this season. I still have a couple months before I run out of episodes to air to decide if I kind of circle back around and maybe there's a second season episode that might jump out at me and hear that it's something that I should cover. And then, I'm also still kind of have a potential actor interview, which I'm not going to spoil here in case it doesn't work out, because I know how these things go. And even if you get contact, that's no guarantee that it'll happen. So, but fingers crossed that might come out as a bonus episode as well. But other than that, this is kind of my last Doctor Who here. Oh gosh,
you should have got a better guess than me. There's so many more people in the world who probably know so much more about Doctor Who, but oh well, yeah. So I'm all you've got.
Well, I mean, I've had the other people that they already came on. I'm always happy to talk to new people, and I'm glad that you agreed to come on, because I'm always happy to talk to new people. And last episode was fun, so glad you came back and did a twofer, because these are kind of the 2 of the shorter episodes. This one is 6.5 minutes long, but a lot of that is credits.
Yeah. Yeah, when you did initially invite me on, I thought that's a really small segment of an episode to watch. I don't know how much I'm going to have to say. But as we've already discovered, I do love talking, so we'll make it work. It'll be fine.
Yeah, you'd be surprised. But as I kind of mentioned already, we are still in the main section of this season, covering the 2022 New Year's Eve special Eve of the Daleks, featuring the 13th Doctor Jodie Whittaker. And on this episode, we are covering the 9th and final loop that starts at 51 minutes and 47 seconds, with Sarah frantically telling her mom to call her back at 10 seconds to midnight, and ends at the end of the episode.
Yeah, as I alluded to at the end of the last episode, this bit cracked me up so hard the first time I saw it, because the idea of, if I phoned my mum and frantically said, "Call me back at 10 seconds to midnight, shut up about it, I've got to go, bye," and then hung up on her, she would immediately call me back. "What is wrong with you? What are you talking about? Call you at 10? What's happening at 10 seconds to midnight? What are you doing?" Like, I would immediately have gotten a straight away another phone call yelling at me, saying, I mean, my mum's fantastic, I absolutely love her, but she would have been truly bamboozled by that, / riddled with anxiety that something terrifying was happening to me. There's no way that she would have waited to call me until 10 seconds to midnight. Not even it's not. No. And I think it's even funnier in this episode, because her mum seems exactly like that kind of person who would phone her back and be like, "What are you talking about, you big weirdo? Also, the lines are going to be full."
Yeah, I do love that. One last time they managed to get stretch out that running joke with practically the only line that she says is in this time is, "But the lines will all be busy."
Yeah, the lines will be down. How will I cut it? No, Mum, they won't. It'll be fine. It's 2022. We're all, we know how to use phones now. It's fine. Yeah, that is, to be honest, that is the thing that makes me lose my suspension of disbelief from this episode more than like anything else, which is bonkers when you consider that it's an episode full of like a nonsensical time loop with Daleks. And my thing is like, there's no way that my mum wouldn't be weird about calling me back. Like, there's no way that would happen. But it's a good job she did do it on time, eh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then we go up to the doctor that has the the trolley of I guess the explosives from the 5th floor, and she says that she'd be great at supermarket sweep. So let me ask, are you familiar with that show at all?
Yeah, so we used to have like a British version of it over here, and it was a thing that I watched any time I was off school sick, because it was always a sort of daytime TV thing, and I found it absolutely hilarious. It was hosted by Dale Winton over here, who I accidentally literally walked into in London the once and then went, "Dale Winton?" at his face, because I'm not cool about bumping into famous people, apparently. But yeah, no, I loved that show when I was a kid, because the idea of like literally running around the aisles of a supermarket and grabbing whatever the heck you wanted was just like of course a child would want that.
Yeah, I love the show as well in the US. I watched that as often as I could. I thought it was so great. Even though I've read kind of articles more recently, looking back on it. And apparently, like even though it was set up as a real grocery store, apparently they didn't actually have refrigeration, and so like all
no.
the refrigerated stuff like smelled really bad.
I see. I sort of assumed it was all prop food too, but maybe that was just the UK version. I don't know. I always found it really funny because the trivia in it was just always so silly, like, or it's like, guess how many grams of protein are in this tin of beans, and you're like, what? I genuinely don't. 12? I don't know. Yeah, which but I love the reference to that. I love one of the things I love about Doctor Who generally is how sort of quintessentially British it is, and it doesn't seem to matter like where the funding is coming from and who's involved. Like, it's always going to have little things like references to stupid early daytime TV British nonsense.
Yeah, although I did also watch the reboot version that was from just a few years ago with Leslie Jones hosting. And I didn't think it recaptured the magic, but one thing that I did love is how much fun Leslie Jones seemed to be having. Like, I could tell that she was someone that loved the original, and she was just having so much fun being the host of that show.
Yeah, it feels it would feel, I think, a little bit more dystopian now with like the cost of living crises and things, like people frantically running around supermarkets grabbing inflatable bananas or whatnot would probably make me feel a little bit uncomfortable, if I'm honest. Because I don't know about your guys' version, but ours sometimes, like, I'm pretty sure for the first couple of seasons before it got a little bit bigger, the prize was literally just like the cost of your weekly shop for a month or something. Like it wasn't an exciting thing you go on to in thousands of pounds. But yeah, one of the things that did tickle me about this sequence is this seems to be a moment where the Daleks have an attack of being bad at aiming, because they are running pretty much just straight down a corridor. Like there's no reason why they shouldn't be getting hit with those lasers. It's just like the Daleks just
I
gone,
mentioned
oh
that.
no.
Yeah, I definitely pointed that out. I think back in like the third loop where all 5 of them were in the narrow hallway, and the Dalek was just machine gunning and not hitting any of them.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, that's a trope I absolutely love from a lot of things. Like like the Arnie movie Commando. I love that bit when he just takes on like an entire garden full of like mercenaries, and they've all got like machine guns, and every single one of them is shooting at him, and somehow he gets clipped by like one bullet, but he's straight up murdering everybody else. And it's like, how is this a thing? How are you this bad? Oh right, yeah, for plot, that's why. Yeah. But it's a trope I don't really mind, to be honest. I think it's quite funny. And of course, like if villains were actually any good at anything, shows would be really short, wouldn't they? Because the heroes would be dead. So, and in this case, obviously, it being the final loop, they would have quite genuinely been dead. So, yeah, we can't have that. So we'll give them an attack of the terrible aim so that we can continue with this plot.
Yeah, and then one other thing that I was kind of, I am breaking this episode down in this way. It did make me kind of question how the time loop works in terms of, they only had a minute, but like for the first 3 or 4 loops, the Doctor and her companions always seem to start the loop right outside the TARDIS. But here, it's like if they started right outside the TARDIS, there's no way they can make it up to the 5th floor and then back down to the basement in 1 minute.
Yeah. I as I said last episode, I 1,000% have to not think about that because otherwise I will just go, well, that didn't make any sense, and that's stupid, and then just like write the whole episode off. But part of me was wondering about whether they just found like an extra stash that was downstairs along with the fireworks, maybe, because that helps my brain to, I don't know.
I kind of think that. I mean, I think they try to explain it, but at the same time, it just doesn't make sense with the first few loops, where I think in the first few loops, the Doctor and her companion should have started someplace slightly different, because I know in the second loop, like Nick and Sarah, they're in the entryway, like mid conversation, that in theory would have been where they were at 9 minutes to midnight. After the first loop, but with the Doctor and her companions, they always seem to, at least in the first like half of the episode, they always seem to reappear right outside the TARDIS, where I feel like they probably should have been somewhere else. But at the same time, in the last in the last loop, it had them up at the 5th floor, which that makes sense if they're setting up this loop, so that way if they reappeared on the 5th floor already, then they were set up to get the explosives and come down to the basement.
Yeah, that does make more sense. I didn't watch the episode closely enough to know if every time Sarah and Nick were somewhere, if they started wherever they were at that minute, if that makes sense. Although I do think there is a loop, isn't there, where Sarah has a panic because she's like, if Nick dies when he usually dies now, he's not going to survive this loop at all, because then that minute will have gone. And he'll be like legit dead. So,
but then, like in the next loop, it seems like he dies like within the first minute, which that wouldn't make sense either, because if he dies within the first minute of the loop and it's based on the previous loop, then he would be dead in the next go around.
Yeah, that is true. I didn't think about that. See, this is why you shouldn't really think about Doctor Who so hard, I don't think. Just accept what they're telling you and just go with the flow. Because I will say, I do think this is like a really strong episode, even though it doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Well, I mean, it makes just enough sense. It makes perfect sense on a first-time watch. Whenever you start breaking it down like this, there are definitely, picks to knit, or knits to pick, with some inconsistencies. I think the other big one that I have is the Doctor seems to have knowledge of things that happened in the episode that she wasn't around for. Like she quotes the Sarah's litany about things that you're not supposed to have in the storage unit, and she's like, this is definitely is something that I forget the line, but this is definitely dangerous. And
oh yeah, it's the thing about how this is something that if you were to set it on fire, it would be
it would have like explosive
hazardous or explode.
consequences.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's true. I mean, to be honest, I always put those sorts of things down to her just knocking around, like the Doctor knocking around for so long that they've seen and heard, everything, and they'll remember stuff like that. But that's just me doing that thing where I just write off Doctor Who stuff that doesn't make sense as like, it's fine, don't worry about it. The one thing that did get me though was that after they've done this loop, they've blown everything up, great. When it cuts to the next day and Sarah and Nick are leaving a hotel and going travelling together and getting into a taxi, it appears like Sarah's got her phone, and I'm like, wasn't that the thing we used to get the Daleks to think there was a person there? Because that was their plan. You said, like, for anybody who bizarrely hasn't watched this episode but is listening to two people talk about it very thoroughly, that's strange. But the plan of theirs was, we'll put the phone there so when your mom rings, she'll say something, they'll go, ooh, a human, shoot the explosives, and boom. Which is exactly what happens. Perfect. Goes off without a hitch. Great. But yeah, she just seemed to have her phone in the next scene, and I was like, well, that can't be a replace. There's no way she's got a replacement phone overnight on New Year's. Like, and even if you did, I don't know about you, but like my phone, I don't know a single person's contact number, because every time I get a new phone, I just do that thing with the cloud or whatever where you just go, there's my new phone, there's my old phone, put them together, they somehow talk to one another, and then my new phone has all my contacts. So like, even if she has got a new phone, like how has anybody got any of the information? Like, that part did baffle me, because
I use my last two phones have been Google Pixels, so everything's kind of stored as a backup to my Google account. So I just put in my Google account, and then it pulls everything except for any pictures and videos that aren't on my that didn't get backed up on the Google Drive. It carries everything over like automatically.
I mean, was that scene supposed to be the next day, or do we think it was further in the future than that? It felt next day.
I think it was further. I thought it felt further in the future.
Okay. I'll let it go then. Well, let's say that, and we'll go with that, so then I don't have to worry about where she got a new phone from.
Yeah, and then one line that I liked in this kind of early moment, as they're kind of building the bomb, I guess, in the basement. The Doctor says, "Haven't seen this much gunpowder since 1605."
Yeah, that was a great line.
And let me ask you, because I did have to look it up, because I hear the year 1605, and that doesn't immediately mean anything to me. Did you recognize the year number right away, or did you have to look it up, or did you just kind of assume?
Well, I just kind of assumed, because like I say, I've got such a bad memory for anything that almost everything that I learnt at school, because I am now approaching 40, is nothing to me. I don't remember any of it. So yeah, whenever they make like historical references and stuff in the shows, like 9 times out of 10 I just have to go to the hubby like, what's that? But this one seemed like a fairly obvious reference to me, so I was like, I think I can calculate this one by myself. I think I think I can get there on my own.
And for anyone who hasn't figured it out, it's a reference to Guy Fawkes and his plan to blow up the Parliament.
The old gunpowder plot,
as featured, as referenced in everybody's favorite movie, V for Vendetta.
I didn't mind that movie, to be honest. I thought it was quite good.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I like that movie.
Yeah, I did like that as a little throwaway joke as well. Very British again. Love that for us.
Yeah, and then the other kind of inconsistency that's it's acceptable because it's it's an episode of TV, but I don't feel like I didn't calculate and see like how much crossover there is, because I know in previous loops, they don't fit the exact timeline. That this is it's supposedly the 5 minute loop, but it lasts for like 6 or 7 minutes or like
Mhm.
8 minutes. But that makes sense because you're spending 3 minutes with one character and then you're jumping back and you're spending the same 3 minutes with a different character. And
Mhm.
so it's okay that it goes long. But I feel like this one, for it being a 1 minute section of the time loop, it takes 2 minutes before we get nearly 2 minutes before we get the 10 seconds to midnight phone call.
Oh, I hadn't even noticed that. I think I was too excited by that point because I was like, yeah, we're going to murder some Daleks. I'm a nice person, usually, I promise, but, Daleks are Daleks, aren't they? I genuinely hadn't even noticed that, but...
And I also realized, because, I kind of mentioned it because we got a little bit of Dalek POV in the last loop whenever the Dalek was looking around at the empty shelves of Nick's storage units. And this time we get the Dalek POV again, but it's got like kind of the blurry, like the blue vision for some reason.
Oh yes, it's because the Doctor makes it dark, so he has to put on like his night vision, whatever. I'm assuming that was planned by her so that the Dalek wouldn't be aware that there wasn't actually a real human standing there.
Right, and then we also had this set up earlier where the Doctor mentioned that the sonic screwdriver can give like false life readings, so she can bounce their life signals wherever she wants them. Like in earlier in the episode, she mentioned putting them on a different floor to distract the Daleks, and then that it's kind of used. They don't specifically point it out, but because the Dalek says that it detects life signs, then you kind of make the leap that the Doctor was using the sonic screwdriver to give the the false life readings in the pile of explosives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you would think that the Daleks would get better at because they're supposed to be quite smart. You think they'd get better at noticing fake live readings or things like that, but it's fine. Don't worry about it. We like to see them get hoisted by their own nonsense, so I do anyway. That's really mean, isn't it? But they did kill like several people several times in this episode, so I don't feel very sorry for them.
Yeah, and then we do get the mom that did actually call it 10 seconds to midnight, and I like that it's and we do have the moments where like it goes by really quickly, but I do like that we see the Doctor kind of swipe the sonic screwdriver over the phone, which and then which allows her to answer the phone remotely with the screwdriver.
I did think though, imagine if you were the mom and you phoned your daughter when she asked you to, because like, let's not think about what would have happened if she'd have rung early, but she phones on time, she doesn't get a response, and then the next thing she hears is the pew sound of a laser gun and an explosion before the phone dies a death. Like that would have been a terrifying phone call for her, surely. like imagine being on the other end of that, and then you can't get hold of your daughter for however long it takes for her to get in touch with her mom. Like terrifying, like straight up terrifying. But that was the plan they had. They only had like what a couple of minutes to think up a plan after they finally, realised what was going on. So, and it was a good plan. I think what I really like about this episode is that it is, even though there are a lot of things that you have to sort of gloss over to make it really work, it is quite smart.
Yeah.
The plan that they execute in the end is quite smart. So it's quite satisfying in that sense.
Yeah. That's exactly what I was about to say. This is a very satisfying episode. It works. It's a fun spin on the Groundhog Day-esque time loop. They make enough changes that it feels fresh, and yeah, it's fairly tightly written, even though they have, I guess, the nice way to put it is they have a few narrative shortcuts
Mhm.
in
Mhm.
order to fudge some details and make it work. But as especially the first time you're watching it, and if you're just casually watching it, it's very easy to brush those aside because it works for the story, even if it doesn't necessarily work 100% logically.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, and I think it's a likable enough cast of characters as well for you to get away with that, because I do think there are some episodes of Doctor Who that I'm a little bit more harsh towards, and it's often because, like, I don't know, the characters are not as well written, or the acting isn't as good. But I think everybody in that, well, I say everybody, I'm not the world's biggest fan of John Bishop as an actor. I don't know what he's like as a dude, can't possibly say. But, you know, I think his acting leaves quite a bit to be desired. But I think, you know, Jodie, the woman who plays Yaz, Aisling B, the guy who plays Nick, like, they're all well fleshed out characters, and they're all very good actors. So I can let things off if I'm invested in the people, which I absolutely was throughout this episode. So yeah, I can let go that a couple of bits don't really make a ton of sense.
Yeah, and then we have this big firework display as the elf storage comes crashing down, and we get the romantic guitar music as Sarah kind of has this loving look towards Nick, and then we also have the kind of the Doctor looking kind of lovingly towards Yaz, even though I think. Let me ask you, as I've asked quite a few people, like, what do you think about this? Because I know, like, for me, having this be my only point of reference, and I've talked about this before, it's like, it seems like this is setting up something, but apparently it just goes nowhere, and then they completely ignore it in the next special, in the Sea Devil special, and then they kind of go off as normal.
Yeah, I have two problems with this, to be honest. The first problem is that I don't like that John Bishop's character essentially outs Yaz to the Doctor. I'm not a fan of that. That should have been her thing to tell her if ever she was ready. I mean, she didn't even seem particularly ready to talk to his character about it at all. So then him just being like, well, the first thing I'm going to do in the next loop is go straight to the Doctor and be like, she's in love with you, you know. Like, not cool, guy. But yeah, it does go nowhere, and it's a thing that I've had a bit of a problem with anyway, because I'm an asexual person. I am a very romantic person, but I'm not like I don't experience sexual attraction, and it's not something I'm particularly like interested in. So I've had a hard time for a long time about the fact that nearly every single piece of movie or TV media has some sort of romantic / sexual storyline in it, and I don't think it necessarily needs it a lot of the time. Obviously there are places where it's very valid, and I'm not gonna, it's a lot to get into, so I'm not going to, because there's too much for this episode. But like, the long story short of it is that I think if you're going to do it, you should do it properly and give it, like, make it characters that like make it so that it's properly addressed. And this feels like it was just a case of sort of throwing this out there for some, I don't know, extra bit of, like, I don't know, conflict, or this extra bit of LGBT rep. But then because it doesn't go anywhere, like, it just falls on its face, and you always have that issue with the Doctor as well. It feels very performative. Yeah, and you always have that issue with the Doctor as well, of like, they're timeless essentially. So like, they can't have a relationship with somebody really unless they want to end up watching you die, which of course they're not going to want to do. Like, I mean, I know that's love generally, because pretty much everybody who loves somebody else is going to see them die, or vice versa. Like, it's going to be horrible. But the Doctor would have to do that repeatedly if they were ever, do you know what I mean? Like, every time they lose someone, it'd be like, right, well, let's just get a new boyfriend or girlfriend, and then they're dying like X amount of years down the line. So it's just, I think it's a weird thing to keep introducing into the show, because it's not a new idea. And they've done it before, and I feel like they'll probably do it again. But this one felt particularly egregious because it didn't build to anything. Like with, at least with Rose, that built up to this big emotional climax of what happens there, which I'm not going to spoil in case you haven't seen it.
And then they go back and kind of give it a happy ending too.
Yeah, they do sort of resolve that one a bit later as well. But like, yeah, this one it just felt like it was a case of like, I don't know, let's do a bit of performative queerness and then move on with our lives. And it's like, well, I'd rather you just give it the time and effort it needs, or not do it at all. Like, you don't have to do it.
I think that's why a lot of people, and myself included, like Donna as a companion so much, because they strictly avoid her relationship with the Doctor was very much 100% platonic, and I think that worked.
Yeah, and I mean, I understand that, like, the Doctor is somebody who is going to sweep you off your feet with all the things that they can offer you, but also their life is terrifying, and it's not something I see that everybody that ever travels with them would fall at. It did feel at a time like it was like nearly every companion was in some way romantically or sexually attracted to the Doctor, and I'm like, all right, calm down. That's not how attraction works. But yeah, it was a bit. I think, to be honest, I don't really think Yaz got a fair cop of it generally, but that's probably a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, and then I do also kind of, as much as, it does feel kind of sitcom-esque, but I do kind of like John Bishop's, little glance between the Doctor and Yaz, and his like little smirk. He's like, yeah, it's almost like, yeah, I did that. Even though it's not really earned, but
yeah. And I think that makes it even sadder, actually, that there's like no payoff for that.
Yeah.
Oh well.
Yeah, and then we see, we get a shot of the TARDIS, the fresh, clean, unmagma'd TARDIS in the middle of the rubble, and then they go inside, and it's, I guess, all, we don't get a great shot of it in the first part of the episode, but I guess it was, messed up on the inside because of the events of the Flux series, and now it's all fresh and clean and shiny and new again on the interior.
Yeah, I was never a big fan of that design for the TARDIS. It felt very oppressive to me, like with all those really big golden, like they look like curled up spider's legs from a dead spider. That's probably why I don't like it.
Feels extra alien.
It just felt really cluttered to me. It's like a really oppressive sort of like filled, whereas like I really like the one that we've currently got with Ncuti Gatwa's TARDIS, which is just all clean, white lines and ramps and beautiful snazziness.
Yeah, I like the technological versions of the TARDIS, and this is really my only experience, but this does feel extra alien to me. Yeah,
it does.
Yeah, and then we get the jump ahead, and I definitely think that it's probably a few weeks, because they in order to prepare for like a trip would take some time, and also I believe that the mom knows who Nick is at this point, and it seems like she's familiar with Nick, even though they do call this a first date, so it can't be that long. I think maybe it was like a week later, so they haven't had time to go on a proper first date, but they were just planning this as a trip, right? Like, we're gonna have our first date be this trip that Sarah has been wanting to do for years and years. That she mentioned it earlier in the episode that if she didn't have the storage, she would love to travel around the world.
That was one of those things that you have to suspend your disbelief about nearly every TV show or movie that exists around how money works in people's lives, because I don't know how you go from owning a storage security like a storage space that only has one paying customer to paying to travel the world. I don't know where that comes from, unless you got a really juicy insurance payout for it exploding.
Well, and they say the insurance probably wouldn't be covered for an active Dalek anyway.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, maybe she got away with it. Maybe she claimed that somebody was storing something explosive, so maybe she did get a big juicy payout. Don't know. But if she didn't, yeah, there's categorically no way she was going on a big old travel sesh with her new boyfriend. But I do love the fact that I was just talking about how I don't like how everything has like every single story has a romance in it. But I do like this one, and I do think it works.
Yeah,
even
I
though
think it
she is
builds
overly
naturally.
harsh to him, like, yeah, it's I think the more you see of him as well, like realizing that he's not just a weirdo who brings things in on New Year's Eve because like he's sad and lonely. He's like doing it because he likes her and he knows she'll be there, and he's just a little bit too scared to like out and out talk to her.
And I believe he also presents as at least somewhat neurodivergent as well, where he's he has these social tics, and previously like he calls it off as like being socially awkward, but I get a little bit of neurodivergence from his performance and the way he treats things and the way that he acts to everything that's going on feels a little atypical.
Yeah. But like you say, it just sort of grow naturally over the episode. I mean, I think it's super sweet that his first thought on that first loop is, oh no, what if Sarah's going to get murdered, and goes to like rescue her. That's so sweet.
Yeah, and that's kind of, and whenever Sarah realizes that that's what he's done, like her affection towards Nick, I feel builds naturally throughout the course of the episode, and like naturally and believably as well. Like it's I think it's a very good progression, and again I think it's credit to Ashlyn B that really sells that progression and the slowly increasing fondness towards Nick over the course of the 9 loops.
Yeah, it's really sweet. It doesn't feel like a sort of arbitrary love story thrown in for no good reason. Like it's actually the logical conclusion to their story, which is nice. Yeah,
and I also love their kind of reference to the romantic comedy subplot where Sarah mentions that their actual first date was getting killed by robot aliens 8 times. Was it 8 times? And then and Nick's response is, I think of it more as a meet cute.
I would agree with him if they hadn't met several times over previous years. I don't know if that counts, if it's like the 3rd or 4th time you've been knocking around New Year's, but oh well.
But at the same time,
it's cute.
Yeah, I think it works because the previous times Sarah never saw Nick as anything more than a customer, and this is the time that's Sarah really sees him as a person and not just a random customer.
Yeah, definitely.
And then that wraps this up. Is there anything else that's you wanted to say about this loop, this episode, or I think you already got your Jodie Whittaker thoughts as a whole mixed in as well.
Yeah, I mean, I love Jodie Whittaker. I think she's fantastic anyway, and I think it was nice to see a lady doctor knocking around. I know a lot of people weren't keen on the idea, and I do think she was given a bit of a short shrift with her stories, but I'm such a big proponent for like representation in the media. It sounds daft. I always thought that was something that was just like, well, it'd be nice, but like it doesn't really matter that much, does it? Until I saw my first asexual character in BoJack Horseman and burst into tears because I was like, oh, this is why it matters, because now I feel like actually seen and like not a big giant flipping weirdo, which is how I've been feeling about myself for a very long time. So I do think it's great that there are like girls now who have examples of the Doctor, and now there are people of colour who have an example of the Doctor, and I love that about it. And I think this episode generally is a really good example of like what Doctor Who is and what it can do, because it's funny, it's heartfelt, it's sweet, it's exciting. There's so much running. Everybody's running. We're always running. There's explosives. There's robots and Daleks and lasers, and it's just got all of that joy about it that makes Doctor Who what it is. Because that's one of the things I love about it, is that I've just been watching the new series of Black Mirror, and as fantastic as that show is, it's like so grim / cynical about the human race that it's like sometimes it's nice to watch like a fantasy sci-fi type show where things are quite lovely actually, largely. Like, there's a bit of peril and you are a little bit scared for everybody. And I mean, in this episode in particular, people do actually get shot and die. But in the end, everybody's safe. The Daleks are gone. People are going off travelling and they're together now. And it's all really lovely, isn't it? And I think it's a great, this would be the kind of episode I would show people who've never seen Doctor Who before, who would say, like, what's Doctor Who like then? I think it'd be a great episode for that. Because it's got the Doctor being in charge, but also not fully knowing exactly what's going on for a long time. It's got plans. It's got the TARDIS being a weird, which it is often want to do. I think it's got everything that a good episode of Doctor Who should have. With a light sprinkling of don't look directly at that, because otherwise it won't make sense.
Yeah, and it was my first episode, and it was good enough to get me excited to start watching New Who from the beginning as well. So I do, as someone who did experience this as my Doctor Who jumping onto it, I agree that this is a good episode to start with. If aside from Eccleston's first episode, I think you couldn't go wrong with using this one. But thank you so much for joining me once again. And again, why don't you take a moment and let people know where else you can be found online?
Yeah, sure. You can find me at Stacey's Parlour on most of the socials, and you can find my podcast, Stacey's Pop Culture Parlour, on Spotify or Good Pods or wherever you get your podcasts usually, or directly via the website popcultureparlour.podbean.com.
And as always, I'm Bubbawheat, and you can find me on all social media where I'm at Bubbawheat. Although I'm most active on Threads these days, so if you want to keep up to what I'm doing, not podcast related, that's the best place to follow me. And also, I mentioned that this is potentially the last Doctor Who episode that I'm covering this season, but this season is not ending just yet. I do have, after this, I'm kind of going off on, other British sci-fi that's not Doctor Who and not Red Dwarf. Although I am starting with some of the Doctor Who spin-offs. So next week I will have an episode about K9 with, which was an Australian, children's TV series that ran for one season. And I'll actually be talking with, the adult star of that show, Robert Maloney. So keep an eye out for that episode. That was a fun conversation. And then, I've got an episode on Sarah Jane Adventures, and because they did a time loop episode in that series, and also another British sci-fi that had a couple time loop episodes in their run, Sapphire and Steel, from the early 80s.
Oh, wow.
Which that's been interesting. And then I may or may not circle back around for a couple extra Doctor Who episodes after that. But this, even though I finished this time loop, this season is not quite over, so I've still got more coming in the next few weeks. So keep an eye out for that. And until next time, smoke me a kipper, and I'll regenerate before breakfast next week.